continues on the announcements that are being made as part of the 20 lakh crore rupee economic package that is looking both at reviving the economy that has been sluggish because of the COVID lockdown and situation, but also at providing certain long-term pending relief and reforms. Today, the government focused a lot on migrant laborers, urban poor, small and marginal farmers, and also street vendors. 2.3 lakh crore rupees have been earmarked to help more farmers get credit. There has been a 5,000 crore rupee fund for street vendors to avail small loans, another 1,500 crore for Shishu Mudra loans, again for the smallest and of the small loan takers. And the big announcements were also made for more welfare for migrant labor. First up though, let me go across to UN Women Deputy Executive Director Anita Bhatia is joining us from the US. Anita, first up, let's just focus on the entire COVID situation and how everyone is dealing with it. You know, across the world, the pandemic has caused a never before like seen situation from the US to UK to Western economies to China, Japan and India, of course, being such a large country has been affected by it. But in India, still so far, because of the early lockdown, we've managed to see a very controlled rise in numbers. Mortality rate is still fairly low and recovery rate continues to rise. How would you look at the contribution of India as far as the global pandemic situation is concerned?
Well, first of all, let me just say that I'm very relieved as an Indian to see that the rates are still thus far quite manageable, and we are hoping that there will not be a big spike in June and July, though there is some concern that the numbers could in fact go up. So I think we do have to celebrate that compared to a lot of other countries, India has managed to do a very good job in managing the rates thus far. When I look at what's happening globally, I think it's really important to put India's situation in context. And I think India's contributions are manifold. First of all, I understand that the team that is working on the vaccine at Oxford includes an Indian scientist. So that's great. I think the example of actually making sure that measures are put in place and followed through is very important. And that's something other countries can learn from, because the evidence is very clear. You actually have to undertake physical distancing, you have to do contact tracing, and you have to do testing. This is proven. And I think the fact that we are seeing these numbers in India is a testament to the fact that the government took early preventative measures.
You know, Anita, since I have you, I want you to speak about what has been announced today. Now, in India, over the last couple of days, the government has been announcing a financial package or a stimulus, but also a reform of the economy amounting to 20 lakh crore rupees. The second tranche was announced today. And very interestingly, labor laws were discussed, which is, of course, something that is in the parliamentary domain. But India is looking to consolidate certain scattered labor laws into 4 very defined labor codes. And interestingly, the government has mentioned how they want women to become, to have greater participation in the labor force and the conditions to be made conducive for them to be working at all kinds of jobs and also during night shifts. How do you look at that in terms of, you know, the women participation in the labor force and also under conducive atmosphere?
I welcome it. I welcome it because women have to be drivers of change and women have to be at the forefront of economic recovery. Women form such a large part of the informal labor force, which of course is the largest labor force in India, that if you don't think about the particular issues of how you're going to involve women, you're not going to have a successful recovery. I think there is an issue about making sure that if women are working night shifts, there is safety and security for them, because we know that this is a constraint for women to get out into the labor market. And so I think the package itself is very welcome. And I think I saw just now that Nirmala Sitharaman, and congratulations to her for this, has announced a second booster shot for the economy. This is really much needed because economies all over the world are flailing. and falling apart. So I think the measures that the government is doing to inject money into the system, to create jobs and to do this in a women-centered way is terrific. I think that is what is needed. The question is it enough? And will there be more needed because the needs are so great? And as we talk about needs, women's needs are, you do have to think about how women work in this, because you have to have safety, you have to have security, you have to worry about women being at the front line, you have to worry about women getting food. But I like to think of women not so much as victims, but as economic agents of change and as drivers of the reform.
Right. In fact, since you mentioned this, I do want to highlight, Anita, that in India there is this concept of self-help groups, which are actually largely women-driven, and this helps in local employment and also involvement of women in skills that they already possess, and therefore they can be contributors to the development overall from a very grassroots level. So that concept already exists. In fact, the government today announced that many thousands of such self-help groups have actually come up in just the last couple of months during the COVID period. They have produced 3 crore masks and 1.2 lakh liters of sanitizers. So just a small example of how women contribute. But overall, I do want to ask you, before I let you go, Anita, what has been the biggest learning you think globally out of the COVID pandemic?
I think, gosh, there's many learnings. And first, let me just say a word on the self-help groups, because I do think groups like Seva in India are a model for groups elsewhere. What India has done in some of these grassroots groups is something that can be replicated in other parts of the world. So there is learning from India that can be taken to other parts of the world. I think self-help groups have to be supported because they are really suffering right now. They just don't have enough resources. And so the degree to which government can allocate resources to keeping them alive and to keeping them vibrant contributors is really, really important. On the issue of learnings from the pandemic, boy, there are so many. First of all, it is the underinvestment in public health systems that we see globally. Right? Governments were caught off guard. Nobody was ready for a crisis of this magnitude. And I think what it has shown is that, we know very often as policymakers what risks are, but yet we fail to act on them. And so I think this is a really hard lesson that the world is learning, that we have not invested enough in the SDGs. The UN Secretary General has said very clearly, this shows that all governments all over the world actually had to do more to make sure that we were reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. So the first lesson, I think, is that we actually have to invest much more in things like public health and making sure that people are prepared for issues like this, because there will be other crises. And I think one good thing about this is that we can now make sure that we are making those investments that we hadn't made before. The second is, I think, in terms of government priorities, right? Governments spend a huge amount on military and on defense expenditure. So, as the GDPs of all countries shrink and the pie shrinks, I think governments have to ask hard questions about, what is your real priority? Because health is also now a security issue, right? Security is not just bombs and rockets. Actually, public health has become a security issue, because if you don't take care of your public health and you are not prepared for a crisis like this, the entire economy can come to a standstill, as we have seen. And then finally, and most importantly, I wouldn't say most importantly, but I would say really important issue is that we have to build societies that are inclusive and that leave no one behind. And that means paying attention to all who are marginalized, including women, and making sure that we are investing in girls' education, that we are investing in systems of social protection, in social safety nets, and in making sure that people do not fall through the cracks. And finally, what I like about the approaches that are being taken in many countries is that we are thinking about how to protect people's jobs, and that we are making sure that they have employment. Because if people don't work and if people don't have jobs, how are you going to get the economy back on its feet?
Yes, absolutely. Anita, thanks a lot for speaking to us. Of course, this is a continuous process. The government is continuously announcing the rest of the package, and the world is also continuously learning how to deal with the COVID situation, and also, institutionalize the learnings for future as well. Appreciate you joining us and speaking to Republic TV.
A pleasure, Shivani. Thanks very much.